Hello again, everyone. My name is James Shotwell. This is Music Biz, and you are in for a treat today because I am proud to share a one-on-one conversation that I recently had with my good friend James Rhodes of FiXT Music. And if you're unfamiliar, FiXT Music is one of the largest independent music companies in the world. They have 2 record labels, and they license music to thousands of video games, movies, and TV shows. They're also one of the first record labels to really embrace the world of video game streaming with services such as Twitch and YouTube. They also have a remix marketplace. They're doing a lot of things really, really well, and James is here to tell us how that came to be, what they see on the horizon, and what you can do to have a more successful career in music, both as a professional and an artist, even if you don't want to tour. FiXT Music has a large catalog of artists who do not tour regularly, but are known around the globe, and he's here to give us some advice on how you can develop your career from the comfort of your own home. And I want to tell you right now that we're going to jump in right when I ask the first question. The audio at the beginning of our chat was a little bit weird, so I cut it out. We're going to go straight into my conversation with James. I think you will absolutely love it, and if you want to know more about what they're doing, check the description below because there's a link to all things FiXT right there. As always, thank you so much for watching Music Biz. Take care of yourselves. You deserve it. Now, as a business guy who I know has artists all over the world, let's start with, addressing the elephant in the room. What has it been like, for FiXT Music the past year? You guys have a very diverse roster. It seems like they're spread all over the planet. How have you been managing your artist relations during this time?
Yeah, so fortunately for us, a lot of our artists are more studio musicians, not as many live performing artists. We do have a number of artists that tour that have been impacted, but by and large, we've kind of built our model on more of a digital footprint and thinking very globally and reaching as many people at once on distribution, and DSPs, music licensing, getting into movies, film, TV. So fortunately, our business wasn't as impacted this past year as a lot of music industry companies have been. So we actually had overall an up year, and streaming has really, been a saving grace for us. Just the steady increase in streaming, while we, continue to try to keep all of our pillars of income growing. Streaming has really become, quite a powerhouse.
Mhm. Now, I want to get to that because part of the reason I wanted to talk to you is I always feel like FiXT is a label that if you know it, you're like all in on it. And then there are people who aren't aware that it exists. And that's also strange to me sometimes because I'm like, you don't like you. I feel like FiXT is a good example of a company that exists, even if you don't know that it's called FiXT, because you guys have penetrated the marketplace so well in a lot of ways. So for everyone that may be new to the company, can you give us like a quick rundown of FiXT and FiXT Neon? Because it is 2 companies, and I feel like it's really important to highlight that.
Yeah. So, it's an artist owned label. Clayton, who has, he's best known for his projects Cell Dweller and Scandroid and Circle of Dust. He and I co-founded the company back in 2006. So 2021 is 15 years for us. And we do kind of fly under the radar, but we have music in major film, TV, games, Super Bowl commercials, and across all of the DSPs, we're reaching millions of listeners every month. So, people have heard our music somewhere usually, and in a conversation, we can usually find some commonality. We're like, oh yeah, I saw that film, I saw that movie, or played that game. I've probably heard your music in there. And FiXT is our electronic rock division. And so it's really our rock and metal division, but in our world, it's always with some element of electronic programming. So FiXT is what started it all, and Cell Dweller really pioneered that sound. And then he started a side project, Scandroid, that was an 80s synthwave project, just because he wanted to do it, and it started really taking off. And then we had another artist do a side project, and we realized, hey, doing this 80s synth stuff needs a whole separate label division. So FiXT remains as it was, and then we launched FiXT Neon about 2 years ago. And now we've got as many artists, and in fact, I think we have more artists on FiXT Neon than the original FiXT division. And in 2 years' time, FiXT Neon is up and running as well as FiXT has been for 15 years. And so FiXT Neon started with synthwave and this kind of 80s sound, but we were continuing to evolve, and now it's leaning into indie pop and kind of across all of the things we do. Cyberpunk, sci-fi fans really tend to gravitate towards our music, so it works really well with gamers and that audience.
I want to talk about that pretty much right out the gate, because I feel like, and you touched on this a bit, that you guys have really made a good impact in the world of streaming and video games. I feel like you were kind of ahead of the curve in a way, because you were getting music in games like Call of Duty before Twitch really took off. And now in the world where Twitch is an omnipresent force in both music and culture, you are two labels that seem to very much embrace that community.
Absolutely. We've had music licensing, and especially into the gaming market, in our DNA since the beginning. Back to kind of actually predating the label, I was already working with Celldweller before we formed FiXT, and he had a song that is still one of his top songs today from Need for Speed Most Wanted. And so a lot of people have come into following Celldweller and now FiXT because of one game 15 years ago, 16, 17 years ago, and there's still people discovering him because of playlists around that game, and just people get into these games and they love the soundtrack, and then they just start following the artists. So licensing in games was there from the beginning. And then in 2015, we were one of the first few label partners that signed on with Twitch to make our music safe for people to use on Twitch. So they don't have the same program going now, and there's a lot more going on with music rights on Twitch. But back in 2015, they had a simple page where it was like, hey, these labels, these artists, their music is safe to play on Twitch. And we were one of the first couple labels. So we got a lot of promotional value and discovery there. And then as Twitch has grown, a lot of streamers have started following us through that process. And now a lot of labels do have their music blocked, and they're getting DMCAs, and Twitch streamers are getting muted. And we've continued to make our music Twitch safe. We're not blocking it. You don't need to pay anything. We want you to use it. And we're really taking a long play view there, that at some point using it on Twitch will be more monetized directly, and there will already be demand for our music. And when they flip the switch and have something there, everybody's going to know what music they want to use already, and we'll be right there. In addition to what Twitch is doing, and they have a new program that we're also going to be joining soon with their soundtrack program, but there's another player, kind of a streaming service that layers on top of Twitch called Pretzel, and we were an early label to partner with them, and we're seeing tremendous growth there. So primarily the Twitch community that's using that app, it's kind of like Spotify for live streamers. And so the streamer pays a monthly subscription to use the service, but all the music in it has been pre-cleared to be safe to use on Twitch. So we're seeing, we're starting to see some significant revenue there that's matching what we do on other DSPs. And it's just a micro DSP, really just for live streaming use on Twitch. But we're an early adopter. And again, you mentioned kind of being an early adopter on those types of things has always been something we wanted to be on the forefront of, versus resisting where the market is going.
Yeah, I was curious about that, because I feel, the general law of music, for whatever reason, still to this day in the industry, is when something new happens, there's a lot of resistance towards it from the old dogs in the game. But FiXT from the beginning has been into this even before, I guess you could say, there were proven results, letting the music be used without knowing necessarily that there would be a return. But because of how you, I guess, doubled down on it over the last few years, and it seems like you guys really have seen that this is a platform that is not only generating a small amount of plays, but actually building audiences for your roster.
Absolutely. And yeah, we take a bit of a non-traditional approach, and there are streamers that use our music for free on YouTube or on Twitch, and now they want to go use it on YouTube. And so then we do utilize Content ID on YouTube to monetize our content there. but now that puts us into a conversation of either working out a license or some promotional trade, which, you know, with larger channels, Dr. Disrespect uses a ton of our music. He has a massive audience. He gives us an on-screen credit at the end of each video, links in the description, and we've seen tons of new fans start following our artists, come purchase their music because of seeing it in, you know, a Dr. Disrespect video. And then there's a whole list of other channels similar to that in various sizes that we partner with and, you know, empower them to use our music, but we get a good value exchange out of it, and it leads to fan discovery and building a new audience.
Yes, I'll say that, you know, even here at Haulix, some of our staff members are big Dr. Disrespect fans. So it comes full circle there. You know, we don't even realize if we're, you know, sometimes I'll be watching something from a streamer, but like, I think I know who this is. And sure enough, it's Clayton. And I'm like, look at this small world moment coming here. Now, outside of just video games, you guys also are big in licensing in general. I mean, the list of TV shows and movies that have used FiXT is literally in the thousands at this point, but I know that there's the John Wick 3 spot is the first one I always think of when I'm trying to explain. But, you know, if you like superhero movies, you have definitely heard FiXT Artists. It's a great example of like, you know, this label, even if you don't know this label, because it's been behind some of your favorite things that you've seen in recent years. Now, when you and Clayton were first working together, did you always know that licensing was, because that's kind of become the new big revenue stream aside from selling catalogs, it's all about licensing these days, but it seems like you figured out pretty early on, like this is the path we need to pursue, like really focus on?
Yeah, actually some of that predated forming the label. So I was working with Clayton for a couple of years before we started FiXT, and it was really because of his success in licensing that led to creating FiXT and him funding, you know, starting a label. So his debut Cell Dweller album, you know, there's like 18 tracks on the album, and every single one of them had been licensed into some sort of film, trailer, game, and it just was getting so much use that it was like, okay, this is a revenue stream we didn't even know existed, and now it's a significant revenue stream. So from day one of forming the label, we knew licensing was something that we needed to have in our, you know, in our playbook. And, you know, also understanding the value of having publishing as well as master rights, and, you know, being able to fully represent the track and lead to, you know, an easy partner for people to work with, instead of having to clear the master side with us and then go clear the publishing with a second party, which takes time, and a lot of these deals happen quick. They want one partner to work with. So having a 100% master sync controlled catalog has been a huge asset for us that strategically was built from day one to put us in that position.
And speaking about this strategy, because I find it so fascinating, I've started several music related businesses over the years, including a record label, and I was always just like, I was so focused on just making the first release as good as it could be, and then the next, and I find myself getting into a habit of just focusing on like the next project, and once it's done, moving on to the next. But you guys are playing a long game that like my brain does not work that way, and I think a lot of people feel that way. And another way that I feel like you've been able to kind of leverage this is the remix element of FiXT Music. Like, if people visit FiXT Music, not right now because you're watching this stream with us, but afterwards, if you head over to fixedmusic.com, you even have a tab all about remixing and stems. And can you talk a little bit about developing that aspect of the business? Because again, it feels unique in a time when that is becoming more common. You guys were seeing where it was going.
Absolutely. This is, again, kind of early days of the label, 2006, 2007. We experimented with running a public remix contest for a Cell Dweller track. And, you know, this is pre-Facebook, you know, this is 2006, 2007. And we were blown away, you know, hundreds of people remixing the track. And there was just this appetite for getting remix stems and turning in remixes. We collected the best of them, did a release, and people seemed to love it. And then we did it again and again. Eventually, we started a whole remix community and operated contests for our artists as well as for other labels, other bands that we were just friends with. And we had, you know, over 10,000 members on this remix community site at one point. However, back then, this was pre-Spotify, and getting people to purchase remixes versus just maybe the ability to get them to listen and stream them and monetize them now. We weren't able to monetize the remix community to the point where we could keep running it. So we shut that down and kind of focused on other areas. But we keep coming back to doing remixes, and it's a strategy that, you know, I've spent quite a bit of time thinking about. And even when there's fans that don't really care about the remix, they just want an original track from an artist. There is a lot of benefit to bringing over new audience, new discovery. I kind of think of it as digital touring. Like, you can remix an artist and then their fans are going to discover it, like they went out to a show and they saw you open for them. So it just leads to all this cross promo and discovery. A couple of years ago, Spotify updated their monthly listener metrics so that a remix for another artist, the remixer got the benefit of the monthly listeners on the remix. So, you know, seeing the impact that that has, there's a lot of value, you know, even in the streaming space for remixes, but especially keeping an artist active, you know, just showing up in people's feeds on their release radar and being consistent with releasing material really keeps the wheels moving. And if an artist is off of their album cycle, instead of there being 6 months, a year, 2 years with nothing coming out, remixes make a great way to use content you already have, generate new masters, contests. We've ran a few contests recently with Label Radar, and they've been a great partner. They have a whole network of producers that use their system to submit to labels, but also to participate in remix contests. And so there's a whole ecosystem that we've kind of built around remixes.
That's wonderful to hear. I'm curious, you know, something that popped in my head as you were talking is, you do have a pretty diverse roster these days. Have you ever discovered an artist that later joined FiXT because of these remixes?
Yeah, a few artists that we have signed have come from remix contests or just reaching out to them for a commissioned remix and then realized, oh, they were so great to work with, we should see what are they doing on their original stuff. So we have an artist, Voicians, who is now he's, you know, almost 200,000 monthly listeners on Spotify. But he was one of the artists participating in those early Cell Dweller contests back in 2006, 2007. He was a classically trained musician, piano, and was just kind of interested in electronic music, was a Cell Dweller fan, and his first time producing was trying a remix on a Cell Dweller track. And now fast forward, you know, 15 years, and he has his own original material, and he's released with not only us, but a bunch of other great labels, and has built a whole career. But it was his early feedback from remixing. He won a contest and then decided, oh, I'll do some original stuff. And then he's built a career from there. And then another artist that we have, the Annex, we reached out to him for just a commissioned remix, and getting to know him through the process of him doing a remix led to, you know, we're on our 4th album with him now. And, you know, there have been a few others like that where a remix has led to a lot of other work.
That's really incredible to hear. Now, you mentioned this at the top of the show, and I kind of want to bring what we've already been talking about full circle, because as you already said, there are many artists on the FiXT roster that are not necessarily touring artists, but that's, so many people think of the music business as like, that's the default artist, especially if you're going to have a record label, you need artists that are going to be touring. But FiXT has never really been a label that people, I guess, associate with live touring acts. So how, can you talk a little bit about the business approach of having a label where touring isn't necessarily item number 1 on the spreadsheet?
Yeah. In fact, you know, building this around Clayton's career, he has toured and he has, you know, been on a bunch of bad touring experiences. And so he really had an aversion to touring. He'd rather just be in the studio making music. So that kind of started our trajectory in that direction. And over time, we've kind of attracted artists that they don't want to tour, or maybe they have a family now and they don't want to be out on the road, but they're really good in the studio. They can produce music. And so we've attracted more and more artists that are of that mindset. But we're so digital focused and consistency focused. It's like, hey, instead of doing an album and then taking a year or two off to tour, what if we just kept releasing music like every month or every 6 weeks, and you're just building more awareness digitally. So then when you do break to tour, more people are going to be able to show up knowing your songs and familiar with you. So we've taken more of the approach that we can build awareness digitally, you know, reaching potentially hundreds of thousands to millions of people versus city by city. And, you know, that's worked for us. I'd have to go back and also mention licensing, you know, from a revenue stream. If we can have an artist producing music that we could potentially go out and license in a movie or a trailer, and a few of our artists have done really well at that, to have them stop making music for licensing and go tour is actually at a risk from the revenue stream that they need to keep feeding for licensing activity. So it's just, we built it in that direction where between streaming, sales, merchandise, content ID on YouTube, licensing, all of those have really filled out enough for us to focus on. And then live is kind of an afterthought for us. Like once an artist hits a certain tier, you know, maybe the opportunities become so obvious and the demand for them to tour that then we go and follow those.
I think that that's a really smart way. So I imagine that when COVID hit last year, obviously everyone had a little bit of a shift, but for you, it probably wasn't that big of a transition in terms of like your release schedule, everything you were working on at that point in time.
Right. Yeah, we really didn't change much of our release strategy at all. The biggest way that COVID affected us initially was we thought, okay, you know, a lot of people are hurting for jobs and income. They might not be buying merchandise. So we really, we pulled our foot off the gas on merch production and kind of physical inventory that we have to pay for up front. And then if it didn't sell, we would be, you know, stuck with it. So we focused even more on digital streaming. But as the year kind of finished out last year, you know, physical sales were coming back strong. And in 2021, we're actually really doubling back down on physical and really trying to give fans now that have, you know, discovered these artists on a playlist or through a game, something physical to get. So whether that's a t-shirt or a CD or vinyl, trying to tap that collectible market, which, you know, obviously at shows, you know, a big part of going to shows is you go buy the band's t-shirt or their merch. So creating awareness digitally and then being able to you know, facilitate some sort of physical product to the fan is definitely a piece of the strategy.
Oh, that's really great to hear. I want to talk a little bit more about artist discovery because, again, you know, so much of artist discovery and conversations I have with labels these days is, you know, maybe they go viral on an app, but they don't actually get the deal until, you know, some executive goes and sees them perform. But I assume that in the case of FiXT, that is not always the case. So
Yeah.
how do you find your artists, not just the electronic ones, but I'd also love to hear a little bit about the groups as well. You know, I subscribe to, there's a FiXT Music workout playlist on Spotify. Recommend it for everybody. Super great. Number one song on there right now is Cut and Run, recent single from Fight the Fade. So let's use them as an example. How did they become a part of the FiXT fold?
So they, like many others in the last few years, have come from initial discovery. We're using Spotify as an A&R tool. We're even just personally listening. I have my personal listening profile, which is indicative of what we sign at FiXT, and checking my Discover Weekly. Probably 3 or 4 artists now that we have on the label came through, literally me just randomly getting them suggested on Discover Weekly going, whoa, whatever this is cool. There's just so much music in the world. It's hard to know everything, but a great algorithmic recommendation like that has led us to discovering several artists, including a few years ago, Fight the Fade was recommended. I've been following them for a couple years. They were just, you know, they're independent. And we had reached out about doing just a one-off song for a compilation album. And we did a track, actually Cut and Run was that track. Before it came out, we had already realized behind the scenes after working with them on one track that, there's something special about this band. We should do a bigger deal. And so we signed them to a multi-album deal before we'd even released anything. And yeah, never seen them live. This is just going on the music's sake, just, for what the music is. And that track has actually done really well. It's already in 2 major Spotify playlists. It debuted up on Spotify's Kick-Ass Metal playlist with over 1.1 million followers. And yeah, while we don't go and see bands live, I guess one point I should bring up here is we are very focused on working with artists where we can have a relationship with them, and it starts with the music, but we're doing Zoom calls or Skype calls or Discord, whatever platform works with the artist. Pretty much any artist that we court and sign, we're getting on video, chatting with them, understanding where they come from, what are they looking for, are they a fit for us, are we a fit for them, and we really try to create and foster kind of a family environment.
I think that's a beautiful thing to hear. It's a good sentiment too, that you recognize that just signing an artist isn't going to do much for you unless you can kind of forge that trusting relationship. So, well, tell me, looking ahead to 2021, you've already talked about how you're going to push a little harder on the physical media front, which I think brings up another good question for you, which is, more and more labels I see these days are trying to, especially new labels, are trying to do a largely digital presence, especially without record stores. And that has caused both delays in vinyl, but also a pullback in the amount of physical stuff that I see. Like a lot of records are coming out and they're like, we haven't pressed the vinyl yet, or the vinyl won't be done for 6 months or so. And FiXT strikes me as a company that is always like, if we can't find a way to do it the way we want, we'll just do it ourselves. And so I'm half surprised you didn't tell me that you are like pressing your own vinyl already or something along those lines. But what are you guys doing to kind of facilitate that in 2021 with this? Is it all about just finding a way to market the digital store? Is it each artist having their own spot and encouraging them to push it? Like, how are you making physical media a thing that people are easily able to access and is easily available to them?
So yeah, a few things actually come to mind there. We're very active not only on Shopify, which we have a weekly newsletter for anybody that signs up with the labels, any of our news. We're educating people about what merch is available there. Obviously, social media. We're running ads on Facebook and Instagram, but going beyond that, we're also really active with listing all of our merch on Bandcamp, and there's just a huge community on Bandcamp that are fans that are there to buy, whether that's digital, CD, vinyl, merch. So Bandcamp, I'm still kind of baffled when I talk to other labels who aren't utilizing Bandcamp. I think it's for anybody running a label, you need to be on Bandcamp. There's just this whole untapped market if you're not on there of people ready to explore your music and hand you money that you're missing out on. So Bandcamp is huge, but then we like to forge deals and get to the end user wherever we can. So we've been set up with a company called Merch Bar for a few years, who get the little merch listings under your artist page on Spotify. Also, there's a little merch shelf of merchandise you can browse and shop from on YouTube if an artist's channel meets certain requirements. So we're seeing Spotify and YouTube generate merch sales through Merch Bar, as well as Bandcamp and Shopify. And then because we have a global audience, we're based in the US, but we really have this truly global fan base. We're shipping merch out from our warehouse here to over 100 countries every year. Again, for artists that have never toured those countries, but we're shipping the merch out all over. And we have worked really hard to try and get reduced shipping rates, with the Postal Service and FedEx and DHL, UPS to make international shipping cheaper. We're working with a company called APC for even more cost-effective international shipping. But we're just finishing a deal. This is, I don't have the exact timeline on when this will launch, but we're looking at launching a European warehouse partner for a European storefront for our Shopify. So we think we're missing a lot of sales from Europe, and we have a lot of fans in Russia where shipping, the cost and the time, you know, weeks or months sometimes to reach certain countries is just, you know, fans won't, you know, part with their money knowing that it's going to take 2 months to get there or the cost is so high. So looking at opening a European storefront where they're going to get quick, cheaper shipping.
I think that's really smart. You know, yesterday I discovered a European artist that I really liked, and I went to their store, and I actually thought twice because they didn't have a US element to their store. So, you know, the shipping, the price difference is always crazy, and then the shipping is outrageous. And I've talked to a lot of people who, if they live in another part of the world from wherever the store is based, they're like, I don't know if I can justify spending X amount for the shipping to get one shirt delivered to me.
Right.
I feel like you're right, you're losing sales there. Now, I don't know how you can apply that to being an independent artist, though there are some print on demand services and such, but I want to talk also about a little bit more in 2021. So we've talked about the physical media aspect in stores, but what else does FiXT have going on in 2021 that people can look forward to? Because I want to ask you some very general music business questions, but I really like driving home the FiXT conversation. So looking ahead to, you know, we're about to start March. So what do you guys have March moving forward?
So we, you know, anybody that's following us knows we have the 2 label divisions, FiXT and FiXT Neon. We will be launching a 3rd division in the coming months in a new genre space. So we're close to a name. We have a bunch of artists interested. So that'll be some big news, and there'll be some tangential news when that happens and goes public, what that is. But another label division, and really we're focused on developing artists, and we've really, you know, 15 years in, and still just as passionate to sign, you know, brand new artists that are just starting out and building them from the ground up. We're also at a point now where we're signing artists that are already more established than, you know, artists that we've signed in the past. So we've got, you know, a pretty wide gap from like artists we're signing that have, you know, 100 monthly listeners. But if the music is good, we're just as into that as signing an artist that has 150,000 monthly listeners. And just the journey of developing artists and seeing them grow, and, you know, not that it's a big justice movement or something for this, but we've just talked to so many artists that have had bad label experiences, that had unfair deals, or they could never get a hold of anybody at their label, or they never got paid. And we really prided ourselves that we have staff, we're here, we're available, there's a family environment, you know, they're getting paid, and working with artists over the long term. You know, we typically have done longer multi-album artist deals. We're getting more flexible to work with artists and be competitive on shorter one-off deals. But the artists that have seen success have been with, you know, it's been the long-term play. And that really goes back to, yeah, we're very patient, and you know, that's hard in business to want to see, you know, huge growth. Nothing has happened for us overnight, but it's 15 years of showing up every day and just moving one more step forward. And then you look back and realize how far you've come. So, you know, overall, we're just going to keep doing what we do. We want to, you know, work with artists and develop more great music and put it out into the world.
I love that. Now, if I'm an artist that only has, you know, 100 monthly listeners on Spotify, you know, hearing from a record label like FiXT it's probably going to really make my day, because I'm going to think, okay, this is how I take that step up. But there's still a big hurdle there. You know, I recently started talking to an artist who only had 86 monthly listeners at the time of our conversation. And they got one playlist placement in the past month, and that took them up into like the 300s, which is, you know, a 300% increase for them. Super impressive, but still, you know, a long way from their first song having more than 1,000 plays on the platform. So there's probably a lot of people out there that are like, when you find these artists that are so small, like, can you give us a little taste of the secret recipe to take an artist from 100 monthly listeners to having their first song with 1,000 plays?
Yeah. You know, we had I'll give two examples and then the kind of some of what we did there. There was an artist, Soul Extract, that he had 250 monthly listeners when we signed him a year and a half or two ago. And his music was great, but we just knew it wasn't reaching the audience. And also distribution. We've really dug deep and made really great distribution relationships. We have a lot of direct relationships with big DSPs, and we get our music to some non-traditional platforms that not every distributor delivers to, but where we found success. So we're focused on where is the audience and getting the music to it and connecting it. And we took Soul Extract from 250 monthly listeners to 60,000 now, which is whatever percent that is, it's significant. And it's been not just, again, overnight, but we have our own label playlists, we have our network and reaching out to other partners and friends. And it's been a year and a half of consistently releasing something monthly, every 6 or 8 weeks, as consistent as we can, to just kind of continue to build that awareness and build on top of what you achieved last time and taking a step up. And it's the continual climb and consistency. If anyone wants to take anything away from it, it's consistency, just showing up repeatedly and building it over the long haul. Another artist that we had some pretty significant success with, Fury Weekend, and we signed him. He was at 1,500 monthly listeners, and he just broke 220,000 monthly listeners yesterday. And again, it was just great music, but it wasn't connecting. He was just putting it, through one of the turnkey distributors, a TuneCore, DistroKid, which is great to get your material out there. But we really took that and actually re-releasing some of his back catalog that it's like, okay, this doesn't have a lot of listens, but reintroducing it and getting it to a wider network, pushing it to editors and press. And again, we've been really consistent for about 2 years with him of releasing something almost monthly. And it's just this steady increase. If as far as there being any other kind of magic sauce to just put on anything in different genres and things, I just say leveraging the tools that are available. I'm saying Spotify a lot, but there's a lot of great DSPs, and finding your audience. Another example would be, there's a DSP in Russia named Yandex. It's kind of the equivalent of Google. It's like the search engine that everybody uses, and they have a music service. And we have found just a massive fan base in Russia for our music. And a lot of labels probably don't spend, more than a second thinking about Yandex. And Yandex now is driving equivalent revenue every month for us as Apple Music is globally. And it's just one niche service in one territory. So wherever that audience is, finding it and then leveraging it.
I think that's great advice. Last week I sat in on, I was on Instagram. I got an ad for one of those like 3 tips to hacking Spotify webinar. Sign up now for free. And I signed up just out of curiosity to see what was happening, because I feel like I see those ads all the time, and I have a morbid curiosity about like when the snake oil comes into the recipe, because I'm like, no one's paying for this ad if they're not going to ask me for something at some point. So I went and I watched the whole. I went by sitting on my laptop like we are right now. I watched the whole webinar, and the three things were, one, just understanding how to share links to your page and save links. 2 was getting on playlists, and 3 was doing social ads of some kind. And then they, if you wanted to learn how to do ads, you could then start paying them for a service where they would teach you how to do Instagram ads, because that's free, but they'll teach you how to do it for a price. And I feel like what I love about what you just said, and something that I get really frustrated with in the industry, is that all too often people try to be like, I hold the key to figuring out Spotify. And it's like, no, you already know how Spotify works. Just work it. That's all there's. That's the whole secret.
Yeah. And yeah, spending ad money and other stuff, you can add some gas to the fire, but you can get a really good fire going without spending any ads. It just is more about, back to that word, patience. Like everybody wants it so quick. And, if you just are willing to put in the work over time, maybe sometimes something just isn't going to work. But generally speaking, we've seen if we just put in the work over time and we're consistent, most things connect. They find their audience. I will say, if you're an independent artist, finding a community and building a community around yourself. So, interacting with your fans, starting an email list, having people that you can communicate what you have going on with. But if you're within a genre or a scene of some type, finding the community around that, whether that's, Discord groups or Facebook groups, or just interacting authentically with things you're in, if you're into gaming and you are in these gaming groups, and then, not that it's about self-promotion, but in an authentic way, people realize, oh, you make music, but from these organic places that you're interested in, and just the discovery and building a network and a community in some of those ways really pays off and makes a baseline for an artist. And as a label, we've developed that over 15 years. So it is easier for a new artist to come in, and we can kind of plug them into a community that they trust us. We built trust with them. So they're like, oh, this is a new artist, I'm going to check them out. And we can see, quicker growth. So trust is another word I guess I'd throw out there, really building trust between you and your audience, pays off over the long run.
And I love the power of the playlist model, because you guys have a lot of playlists. You have some cross promo in there. Not every artist is in every single playlist, but you guys are kind of harnessing the power of your community, where you can plug in some new artists if you find something. And as an independent artist, with independent artists that I've worked with, we found that taking a similar approach can really help build streams by just making that association in people's mind. One of the artists I worked with recently started a playlist that just had a silly name that they knew people would maybe look up and find humorous, and then used it to associate themselves with a bunch of similar artists, to be like, oh, if you like this band, this band, and this band, you'll like us. Well, kind of taking that old press release trick up for fans of and plugging it into the playlist world,
right,
can start to build you an audience. Now,
yeah.
Go ahead if you have something to say.
Yeah, no, there's a number of thoughts that could go there. I don't know that we should get into here, but there can be benefits and disadvantages to where and how you want to associate yourself in Spotify. If you really are not thoughtful necessarily on the front end about what artists you associate with, and then you algorithmically, in Spotify's algorithms, get associated with an artist that maybe long-term you don't want to be associated with, sometimes it can be hard for artists to disassociate there. They keep getting recommended to the wrong audience instead of the audience they want to reach. So,
That's true.
Yeah, be intentional about who you want to target.
Yeah, it's one day Spotify for artists will allow people to change artists you might also like. It has to happen eventually.
Yeah.
Yep. I want to get to a couple of questions before I have to let you go. So if anyone watching on Zoom has a question, feel free to drop it in the Q&A portion or the chat. Heather Johnson, you are first up with the first question. I'm going to ask it to you, James, right now. Heather wants to know, what resources do you use when reaching for editors and press? And I think that also includes, like, how do you find ways to promote FiXT? Because again, you guys do exist in a niche field. So I imagine that it's not as easy as like blasting an email release out to 10,000 people. How do you find the right audience for your music?
So yeah, research is definitely a big piece of that. So, and that can take multiple forms, searching, Googling is going to be a huge piece to it, but kind of reverse engineering. Are there press editors or playlist editors that are covering artists that you feel like your project could be associated with? And then reverse engineering and truly trying to understand, what are they looking for? What sites do they write for or work at? Or, finding their contact info, that can be a huge mystery. And, there's lots of tools out there, lots of cold emails that go unanswered, but putting in the work of researching, and again, it just takes time. Several years ago, we hired a playlist pitching company, and this has been 3 or 4 years ago, 4 years ago probably. And what they did and what we paid them, we stepped back and went, I think we could do better ourselves. So we rolled up the sleeves and we individually researched, playlists on Spotify, find who runs that playlist and, on Facebook, and contacting them, reaching out. And, we researched over 1,000 playlists. And for a while, we probably had a 20% success rate. And then, it dropped to 10%, and everybody else figured this strategy out too. And so now that market has really been flooded, and there's just so much spam now of everybody, pushing things that avenue has kind of got clogged up. And now there's kind of the opposite problem. There's a lot of playlist companies that are like, hey, we'll playlist your track, and they end up botting the playlists, and people are getting their music taken down. So the writing the right cycles as they happen. There was a time when, hey, the opportunity was to reach out to people directly and like pitch playlists, but that's kind of evolved, or devolved, I guess. So I don't know if I answered the original question, but a lot of research and trial and error.
All right, perfectly timed, because we just got another question that I definitely want to make time that we get to. Heather says that you answered it as well, James, so good job. Up next, Michaela, watching from, I don't know where, it doesn't tell me, I don't know why I said that. Michaela asks, when starting a record label, funding is clearly going to be the first roadblock. So do you have any suggestions on ways a new label should work about funding themselves, getting to that first release? Like I said earlier, it's always like the big hurdle. If you can figure out how to put out one record, I believe you can probably figure out how to put out 20 records. But how do you recommend people get to that first release?
I think there may be a misconception about how much money you need to do it. And when I talk with other labels behind the scenes, sometimes I hear how much money they spend, and typically I feel like people overspend. And we're pretty conservative with how we spend, but we try to spend really wisely. And again, taking more of the patient route to building it versus, hey, we've got to spend all this money up front to like break this thing right now. But I think there's fairly affordable ways to get music released. If it's a label where you're convincing artists to release with you versus them going directly to, just a TuneCore DistroKid. I think there's got to be some sort of angle there. Funding, I really have not a lot of experience in funding. We Clayton was the artist that founded FiXT, and in the early days it was just he and I, and the startup money was just really for me to have enough to make pay rent and eat, and we built it over a few years before we brought on the next person. Again, I don't know if I answered that fully,
I think you did. And I'll add to it by just saying that as somebody that had a label that was nowhere near as successful as FiXT Music, but definitely put out some releases. I think that for a first release, there are a couple of approaches that you can really take in this day and age, which is figuring out what it is that you can offer an artist. So in our case, I think the first couple of releases that I did, we made cassette tapes because those are relatively cheap. For like $250. You can get 100 cassette tapes that are all packaged and look nice in different variants. And if you can sell those, you can make enough profit to get to the next tape and then slowly start to build up that way. But one of the record labels that I really admire these days in the alternative punk world is No Sleep Records. And they have a great program where they're taking artists and agreeing to put out their first release digitally, which may not seem like a big offer to an artist, but if you can promise some level of promotional support behind it and getting that and allowing the artist obviously to keep their masters and keep that money, but just saying like, let me do what I can to help this record along. And if it does really well, maybe using that as a launching pad to develop a relationship that later leads to a release once you're able to save money. And as a third option, if I can borrow from what Epitaph Records has been doing over the last couple of years, is that they sign an artist to put out like 2 to 3 singles, usually enough to feel like a 7-inch, but sometimes they just do the release digitally. They'll do that one release with the artist, super small, super on budget. And if it does really well, then they'll work towards doing something bigger. But it's all about figuring out like, what can you afford to spend? And then what's the most that you can do with that amount of money? And then now that we're in the digital age, there's a lot of room to do that with very little money. That's just my 2 cents. All right, I think we have time for at least one more. Damien got his question in here. So Damien, it is your turn, and you wanted to know, how do you see the impact of innovations and evolution of social medias on reaching a new audience? TikTok, Spotify, pre-saves, updating graphic identities, towards all that. Now, James, is FiXT a TikTok label?
I would not say we are a TikTok label. We do have profiles on TikTok, but we're very small fish in TikTok. But we've been talking about TikTok on a weekly basis for probably a year and a half or something. But it's only been, I'd say, in the last few weeks that we are actually going, we think we're starting to see what we need to do here. So as new platforms come out, trying things out, really just being a consumer of it. I only recently kind of have seen what it was, but spent enough time in it where it's like, okay, I really get how people are using the platform now. And now we're having a lot more productive conversations about the platform. And I think that the data is undeniable. TikTok as a platform is driving huge amounts of artist discovery, music streaming growth. Things that trend on TikTok are having massive increases on Spotify and Apple and Shazam and just all these other places. So every new platform is an opportunity for a totally unknown new artist to make their mark. It's the labels that wouldn't switch from physical to MP3. And if you're still holding on to the old platform, you miss the wave of the new one. And the labels that are resisting TikTok are going to see new artists, new labels ride that wave, and they're going to get left behind. We're like I said, we're small fish there. We don't have it totally figured out, but we know that we need to be there. So we're making the effort, and we're going to put in the time to see if it pays off.
Wonderful, great answer. And if I'll add 2 cents to it, because I am massively addicted to TikTok, as I think a lot of people are, especially if you're probably doing this and you're wondering about it, which is that there, as James kind of just said, there's a lot of opportunities that are happening because of an app like that and artists choosing to embrace it that might not have happened otherwise. And to speak outside of the world that FiXT occupies, the world of alternative punk, we can go to country. There's this artist called Trey Lewis. I'm not going to say the title of his song here, it's a little offensive, but he's a country songwriter, had never hit it big, didn't sell any of his songs, never worked out. But he wrote this kind of rude and crude love song that he uploaded to TikTok back in November. It has since garnered 20 million plays or something crazy like that on Spotify. He's been in Rolling Stone. He's been everywhere. Still doesn't have a major label deal because I don't think that there's any radio traction there. The 4-quadrant approach to marketing an artist won't really work for him. But as an independent talent, he's created a path of being able to support his career full time outside of the traditional label system, all because he found his audience on this platform. And I think that if you can find your audience anywhere and leverage that for your success, that's a good recipe to being in this game for a while. Now, I think we might have one more real quickly. We had an anonymous question, and it's not a question. It just says, I'm a really big fan of FiXT and what you guys do, and this has been really good and insightful. So cool. James, there's a nice compliment for you. Yeah, not really a question, but we appreciate that. And before I let you go, James, I want you to give us a little taste of what's the new music from FiXT. What's the latest release? What's the next release? What should we be listening to?
Yeah, we have a lot coming out. We release music typically every Wednesday and Friday, if not between the 2 labels, maybe 1 to 2 tracks per week per label. But we have a ton of great stuff coming up. There's new full-length albums coming out from Neutronic, from Soul Extract, The Bad Dreamers. There's new Cell Dweller. Pretty much all of that is public if you're following us, that those things are coming. We have new artists that we're announcing. We have an event for our FiXT Neon label division on March 11th. I'm just looking at the calendar to confirm. March 11th, we will be having a YouTube event where we'll be announcing some new signings, some updates to a bunch of artists and new things we're doing. So if anybody wants to check that out, March 11th on the FiXT on YouTube channel. And like I said, we're expanding to a new label division soon, and it'll be something that when people see it, they'll get it, like how it makes sense with what we've done. Yeah, we're excited for more artists and more music, and getting more out into the world.
I thank you so much for being here. Real quick, I want to plug that we have another Haulix live event. It's happening in March at some point. I don't want to announce the date just yet because the guest isn't ready to. So we will have an event in March. Until then, this whole event will be on youtube.com/musicbiz tomorrow. We just posted a new video there today. So if you're not sick of looking at me and hearing my voice, you can head over to YouTube and watch hundreds of hours of it. As always, check out all the FiXT things. You can find Haulix at haulix.com. It's the industry's leading promotional distribution platform. James and FiXT have been using it for as long as I've known him. And yes, thank you all so much for being here. This has been a lot of fun. And if you want more advice, check out our blog, haulixdaily.com. And please like us on Facebook. Every webinar, we also simulcast on Facebook. So if you ever miss an announcement for any reason, you will see us on there. And yeah, you can go give it a like right now. It's Haulix Official on Facebook. But if you just look up Haulix, it'll be there. FiXT is FiXT. So give them likes, FiXT Neon. Just go support everybody and support one another. Thank you for being here, James. Thank you so much for participating.
Thanks.
And I hope that your Thursday goes well from here on out.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, everybody. We will see you soon.